we a sports shows, updates, and interviews. The only way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick that, relax, the TWSN.
Shout out Young Swish.
Guys, for tuning in to another episode of State of the Jungle presented by the Right Way Sports Network. It's good to be back with the boys. It's been a week break. We've had a couple of interesting couple of weeks. Obviously, I was out with health things and then back, and then the T. Higgins interview happened, and then we're back this week, and then we're off again next week because we won't be in town. It's just a weird time right now, but we're excited to be back. While we got you guys here, do us a huge favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel. Turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Also, drop your questions, comments, thoughts in the comment section so we can get to them and we can have you guys join in on the conversation. I think I want to start this thing off with the T. Higgins interview, right? Just to make it quick, simple, kind of get it out of the way a little bit. It was a pretty cool interview. It was really, really good to sit down with T. This is something that we were talking about that was in the makings for the last year. Didn't quite pan out for contract reasons, but you know what? It was just really, really good to sit down with him, get to learn a little bit more about him, learn his motivations, learn about what his expectations were for the Cincinnati Bengals. Learn we had a lot in common. He swears that he can beat me in a basketball game. I disagree with that. And it's okay. I understand. The odds on that might be T. Higgins minus 700 or T. Higgins minus 1,000. And that's okay. That's all right. People don't have to believe in me and my basketball abilities, but I know for a fact that I could beat T. Higgins in a three-point contest. And hopefully one day we get the opportunity to kind of break that down. But it was a great interview, guys. It was great to talk to him. It was great to kind of get everything out in the open from the contract stuff all the way to some other things. We've already got our next interview lined up and some pretty interesting interview an interesting opportunity that I didn't foresee happening. So Evan, you'll kind of get a laugh out of this. I got a text the other day, and it was after the T. Higgins interview. A bunch of athletes started chiming in, and they want to sit down and do some interviews with us. And Logan doesn't even know about this. Well, Daniel knows now because he was there when I got the text. But apparently, a certain quarterback that just signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers and me might be doing a sit-down interview at the end of July. And when I say it was something that I did not expect, and if you guys know Evan has a hate relationship with this quarterback. Some think this quarterback is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time.
I am completely fine with everything he has put on the field himself as a football player. Yeah.
Well, the opportunity to sit down and do an interview with him has somehow arisen. We'll see if it actually happens. But I have our next interview sitting down with another big-time Bengals player I'll be sitting down with in about 2 weeks, and I'm excited for that. It's going to be really, really cool. It's going to be a really, really awesome opportunity, some really, really awesome stuff happening here at TWSN. I just want to thank you guys for still staying locked in with the channel, the content that we produce, even though we haven't been having State of the Jungle consistently. We will get back to that guard, obviously, when football starts to pick back up. I just think it's important to have the guys sort of have a little bit of offseason to themselves. But I want to jump right into this as well. Germaine Pratt is no longer a Cincinnati Bengal. That is not a shock to anybody. I could tell you the Colts were a team that I thought would be interested in him. But at the end of the day, he signs with the Raiders. But it gets people talking because I feel like the conversation centered around Germaine Pratt kind of shifted, to be honest with you. I think you had the people who cover the team who were saying, well, the Bengals should do better by Germaine Pratt. The Bengals did wrong by Germaine Pratt. But it's weird. The conversation leading up to his release was drastically different. It was Germaine Pratt is no longer the player the Bengals thought he was. It was Germaine Pratt is this, Germaine Pratt is that. And now it's like, well, he's out of the building now. Now it's some big loss, and the Bengals have holes on the roster, especially with the young linebacking core. For me, I have a little bit of an issue with that. I have a little bit of an issue with that because two of those things can't be true. You can't talk about how much of a liability he was out there, and then talk about how major his loss was. Because with that thought process, you're pretty much saying that any one of these young linebackers the Bengals drafted, and Demetrius Knight, you're pretty much saying any of these guys, Barrett Carter, they can come in and basically do the job that Germaine Pratt has done. The issue I have with that is I think that Germaine Pratt, I do think that after he signed that second contract with Cincinnati, he was misused. I do not believe Germaine Pratt was an every down linebacker. Where he was his best was a 2-down linebacker. He's made some of the greatest plays in Bengals history. That does not absolve him of the fact that he did struggle. But we have to ask ourselves, why did he struggle? It's because he was tasked with more. That was his whole entire gripe why he wanted to leave Cincinnati in the first place. It's because he wanted a larger role. He got the larger role and he proved that, hey, that larger role did not work for me. Now he might go to the Raiders and look like a completely different linebacker because he's now tasked with a smaller role. He might be used best where he's fit best. And what do you know? He's with a staff that sort of help, worked with him. They're the staff that help scout him, right? When he first was coming out of the draft, that staff, the Marvin Lewis staff, got let go, and they basically turned over the paperwork to the new staff that they had kind of had, and then they drafted Germaine Pratt. But he's back with some familiarity to a degree with the Raiders. But I'm not there yet with saying Germaine Pratt was going to be a major loss, only because the conversation around him for the last few months has been he's a liability and it's time to move on from him and save that money and put it elsewhere. I've been talking a lot. Evan, I want to get your thoughts on this, and then I want to let Logan and Daniel chime in on here.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that the Bengals maybe could have done a little bit better by him by letting him go a little bit earlier. Yes. I can understand from an organizational perspective why you might want to wait until after the draft. But to wait this long after the draft, that's where it kind of gets you kind of lose your footing on the high ground, right? Mm-hmm. Before you did have him under contract, maybe you didn't get the linebacker you want, and maybe there was still a way for him to carve out a bigger role for this team going forward if that didn't happen. After you took a linebacker so high, you knew you weren't going to be keeping him. After you double dipped at linebacker, you definitely knew he was not going to be seeing a significant role for you. So that stands out to me, but I do think you're correct that the standard of play was not as high as it was. He had a really, really great year. I think it was 2 seasons ago now, in his contract year, and things are just getting a little tighter around the belt for them financially, and they're going to have to figure out where they're spending their money. And they got a lot cheaper at linebacker. They maybe got a lot more athletic as well, and hopefully that all kind of makes up for a net positive. Hopefully Germaine Pratt kind of, bounces back a little bit and sticks around at the Raiders and is a good veteran presence for that defense. Wish him the best. Obviously some good moments there getting into the playoffs, but yeah, it sucks for Germaine Pratt. It sucks that the Bengals waited this long. It's just one of the many things that the Bengals have been doing this offseason that just kind of generally sucks, but it is what it is. And at least he's on to somewhere where he feels more appreciated and more like he can have an impact.
Yeah, I think, with Germaine Pratt, there's been a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of different opinions from game to game to week with him. That's just how the linebacker position is. Like Malik alluded to earlier, he's made some fantastic plays for us in the brightest stage, in the biggest moments, all these things. He's provided so many just awesome moments. And, that's why we all love him. And that's why he did so much for us. He provided us our first playoff win in so long and all these things. But, we see it every year. And I don't want to say he's like rapidly declining, but he's clearly losing a little bit of a step. How his fit in without Golden and the Bengals' new defensive systems was a clear question. Like it was just a clear and obvious time to part ways. Yes, we could have done it earlier. Yes, maybe we could have, traded or whatever it could be. He's off the team. But at the end of the day, we brought in all these linebackers and we all knew it was coming. Like nothing should be different between now from the moment he requested a trade or whatever it was months ago. Nothing has changed. Germaine Pratt didn't magically get better over this time. Like he didn't get younger. He didn't start to miss less tackles over this time. He was a great player for us. But there becomes a time when there's a clear and obvious breakup that needs to happen, and that's all it was. He could go to the Raiders and be a stable veteran presence for them in a different role, but the Bengals don't need a steady veteran presence to hold the room together. They have Logan Wilson. They need athleticism. They need speed. They need coverage ability. They need all these things that he no longer provided, and that doesn't make him a terrible football player all of a sudden. It's just the fit in Cincinnati no longer made sense. What they needed from that position, he no longer provided, and it's one of those things that it was just time. It was time for everybody to make a change, and that's all it needed it to be.
Yeah, when you look at Germaine Pratt, the one thing I'll say about this whole thing is it was clear from the get-go what was about to happen, right? Bring in Al Golden. Okay, maybe Pratt's going to end up staying. And then once you draft 2 linebackers, it's wraps. And for the Bengals, I think that this kind of goes to, one of the biggest questions I have around this team is, hey, you just freed up $6 million, roughly, right? You're about 7th most cap space right now, around $30 million. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do with it? And that's where my mind goes to this, right? Is because Germaine Pratt, his time, if he would have been a starter this season, he probably would have been fine, but it was clear it wasn't going to work anymore. There was too many plays we can all point to last year where it's not being able to catch the quarterback around the end, being a little too slow, just not having that quickness. It wasn't going to work, and it's clear the way the Bengals are going. They're going speed. You get Demetrius Knight, you get youth, you get Barrett Carter, you get youth. And you look at the Raiders, I think it's a decent fit. They just needed somebody, right? Because they got Devin White, they got Cody Lichtenberg, who they drafted, and that's pretty much it. So the Raiders needed somebody. We'll see what Pete Carroll can do with him. But they paid him about $4 million. And like I said, my mind just goes to, what are you going to do with this, right? Mm-hmm. Because we entered this entire offseason saying, hey, you got rid of Kappa, you got rid of so-and-so, you cleared up a lot of cap space. You already paid Jamar Chase. You already paid T. Higgins. You got Trey Hendrickson now here. So I look at the Bengals. They cleared up some cap space, whether it was probably a little too late. But what do you do with this? That's my question, because I'm sure we've all got questions about the offensive line. We got questions about Trey Hendrickson.
Hell yeah.
And the Bengals, what do you
Even
do
though
with that
Lucas
extra
Patrick
$6
looks
million?
just like Evan. Just wanted to say that. But a bigger version. I'm serious. And Evan looks like an in-shape Lucas Patrick. Let's be honest with ourselves. An in-shape Lucas Patrick. A non-NFL prime athlete. Tell me he does not look
so
like
I need
him.
to throw on 70 pounds.
I'm telling you.
Throw on 70 pounds, learn to long snap, and maybe I got a chance. Is that what you're telling me?
I can see exactly what you're talking about.
He looks
for
like
sure.
I'm trying to tell you.
The beard is a little scraggly right now. Maybe that's giving me a little more.
His is scraggly.
I do want to say one thing though. When the hell did Logan become Duke Tobin? Because literally Logan's response was such a Duke Tobin response. They had the same exact monotone. It's not Germaine, not like Germaine Pratt became a bad player or he started just to regress. I'm like, your coach, you're ready. He's primed and he's ready for the season. He's ready. Oh man, like why isn't my son playing enough? Well, there's a lot of bodies out there. We're just trying to.
Everyone's got to get their chance. We got a lot of good players out there.
Everybody's gonna get an opportunity to play in our system. That's literally gonna be him. No, but we're having a little too much fun. I missed you boys. I really did. Make sure you guys do us a favor. Drop your questions in the comment section because we're gonna be sure to get to them. We're gonna be sure to talk it all through and have this conversation. Yeah, Germaine Pratt he gave us some of the best memories a Bengals fan could hope for. Never forget that interception against the Raiders. Funny enough, he's a Raider. That lifted the playoff drought. Literally, Daniel and I were in the building for that, and it was just such an awesome moment seeing fathers and sons hug and cry, and best friends hug and cry. People getting engaged in the stadium after that. I mean, it was just a crazy moment, and Germaine Pratt had a big say in it. That season was remarkable. That season was special. And I wish him nothing but the best. To our many run-ins at Ruth Chris downtown Cincinnati, where he wore the oversized pants. Listen, Germaine, going to wish you the absolute best in your future endeavors with the Vegas Raiders. I hope you go on to have a phenomenal rest of your NFL career. Hopefully one day you will take a place in Bengals Ring of Honor because you did have one of the greatest moments in Bengals history, and you'll always be remembered as Playoff P. So with that being said, appreciate you, Germaine. We wish you the absolute best. And I also want to just say, give a shout out to Marissa. Marissa's back on the ones and twos. Jimmy's not here today. But
Snap.
Marissa's being Superwoman, right?
Handling it all, man.
She's handling it all. She's being Superwoman. She's getting clips up while we're doing the show. She's listening to my annoying voice. And, she's doing a great job. So just want to give you credit, Marissa. I want to move on in other news to Trey Hendrickson. I hate to talk about Trey Hendrickson again, but we have to talk about Trey Hendrickson again. Why? It's going to be news until it isn't news. Here's what I'm hoping. There's no State of the Jungle next week. I'm hoping by the time that we are back on State of the Jungle, Trey Hendrickson's situation is resolved. Because the last thing that the Cincinnati Bengals want is for Trey Hendrickson's situation to go unresolved, but TJ Watt's situation gets resolved before Trey Hendrickson's situation, because that would be bad news for the Bengals. You have to somehow make this thing right. Right now, you have no proven pass rushers. And listen, I appreciate Al Golden. He's saying all the right things, right? We have the right players. We've got people like Joseph Osai. I keep hearing that name over and over again, stepping up, taking advantage of this awesome opportunity. But let's call a spade a spade. We don't have any true pass rusher that is a proven pass rusher. We could talk about potential all day. We could talk about the resurgence of a Miles Murphy. We could talk about Joseph Osai taking that next step. We could talk about Cam Sample taking that next step. The fact of the matter is, none of these guys are Trey Hendrickson. Even if they play up to their absolute best, are any of these guys giving you 17.5 sacks in a season?
No, maybe combined.
Are any of these guys capable of leading the NFL right now in sacks this year? I don't know. I do not see that. As much as we talk about how all these guys have stepped up, how we have linebackers playing edge. I want to know the linebacker you have playing edge, by the way. But, the way we're speaking about all these guys, let's be very, very clear. None of these guys, and make sure I'm looking at the camera, Marissa, none of these guys are Trey Hendrickson. We've got to stop, and I don't mean Bengals fans. I mean just NFL in general. When it comes to contract disputes, we got to stop talking about guys like they're easily replaceable. We got to stop talking about guys as if they're, and I'm not saying this is what Al Golden has done. I'm just talking about, I see people that are really drawing a line in the sand. There are some people that are pro front office. There are some people who are pro Trey Hendrickson. Listen, I'm right down the middle. But what I will say is I think Trey Hendrickson has earned every penny. You cannot approach a player like you approached Jamar Chase last year and say, hey, we're going to take care of you. And then when it's time to take care of the player because you're having buyer's remorse because you signed T. Higgins and Jamar Chase because they twisted your arm, you can't then say, well, you're still on the contract technically. Well, technically, you told me you would take care of me. Technically, you told me that my contract situation would be handled. And, well, my contract situation has not been handled. And somehow I'm made out to be the bad guy. For all the reasons that the Bengals have for dragging their feet and not wanting to sign a guy like Trey Hendrickson right away because of the age, because of injury concerns, he has every right to feel the same concern. What if he goes out there and gets hurt? What are the protections? What are the guarantees for a guy like that? If he goes out there on a one-year contract, well, his life is forever changed. He's no longer going to be guaranteed that huge contract. So therefore, if he were to get hurt in a mini camp or whatever the case may be, and he misses the year, well, then he's playing on one-year deals for the rest of his career.
Mhm.
He misses out on that last big payday. That's what this whole gripe is about. The Shemar Stewart thing, the Trey Hendrickson thing is not the same. One is not about money. One is about language in a contract. It's not the same thing. Shemar Stewart's rate is fixed into what it's fixed into. I think Kelsey Conway did a great job of explaining what the Shemar Stewart holdup is. It's, well, we're trying to change language that if anything were to happen, we can void the guarantees in your contract. So I guess at some point it is about finance, but it's really not about that. It's about the language of a contract. The Bengals wanted to nickel and dime their way, but it goes back to what Evan, Logan, and Daniel and myself have been talking about for weeks. Who are you paying? Who are you paying? Are we willing to sacrifice locker room chemistry, the camaraderie, just to be right? And I thought what Shemar Stewart said was amazing. And we're not going to talk about Shemar Stewart just yet because that's the final topic before we get to questions. But I thought what he said was pretty amazing. And we're going to get to that. But let's get Logan's opinion on this. Logan, Trey Hendrickson's situation is still not figured out yet. We are in June. Football is knocking on the door.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Man, I feel a lot. I agree with a lot of what you said about it. It's just, I hate to keep talking about it, man, because it's just growing in frustration. It's just getting annoying at this point. It's like, it's even getting annoying for us. Like, oh man, we got to talk about it again. We got to talk about it again. Yeah, because nothing is ever progressing and nothing has ever felt like we're moving one way or the other. Like, we kind of thought it was going in, the route of the departure. Like, hey, of course, of the trade. Okay, here it is. See a trade. Like, let's start working some trade packages. Let's start writing these articles. Let's start, looking at draft picks to get, players to get, whatever. Then we're like, okay, cool. Like, that's where we're at. And I was like, maybe not. Maybe we're gonna sign him. Let's offer him this. Bengals offer him contract, whatever. And now it's just, ever since then, it's just been this and that and this and that. He said, she said. And that stuff is always going to be annoying, no matter what player it is. Trey Hendrickson, random rookie you love, random this player you love, whatever. Is that back and forth where, that he said, she said stuff is so annoying. And it's just, that's all we're getting from the situation right now. And it doesn't feel like we're inching closer in one direction or the other. It's just, you're just going with what people want to tell you, and who knows if what they're telling you is even true or what the real situation is, if the agent's doing a bad job, whatever it is. Like, there's just so many opinions out there where it's just, everybody's just, at this point, we just got to sit and wait and see what the hell's going on. And it's so frustrating that it's taken to this point. We've said that for months now, that it's so annoying that we're at this point. And I don't like, the longer, every day, every hour that goes on, it's hard to see it being resolved in a positive manner. And I think that's the most frustrating part about it to me, because we just got done talking about Germaine Pratt and all the things he's done for us. Well, Trey Hendrickson has done so much more for us and for the league, and just being a true game wrecker and all these things. And we just continue to kind of just be slow and not really ever show any urgency about anything ever. It's just getting real annoying. Like, I've tried to be a little nicer about it going up to it, but it's just flat out annoying for people at this point. And that's us. It's annoying us. I can't imagine how much it's annoying him and all these other people that are truly like in the thick of it. It's just real annoying. And I'm pretty sick of it, to be honest. Like, I just want it to be done. Whatever it is, he's gone, he's here, he's extended, he's sitting out, whatever it is, just give me the conclusion. All right.
Yeah, I think for me, the frustrating part about this, and this is just a message to the Bengals, right? TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, Aiden Hutchinson, these are three guys that are on the cusp of getting a major contract extension, right? We obviously saw Myles Garrett. Obviously, we saw Max Crosby. But you look at a guy like TJ Watt, who is 30 years old, comparable, and I struggle to see how the Pittsburgh Steelers won't re-sign him. For me, what is the holdup right now, right? And this is kind of the tale of two halves. We talked about this. I think Evan and Malik kind of brought this up like 2 shows ago. Hey, this may not be resolved anytime soon, because at this point, the Bengals, what else are you gaining from, holding out of the contract the past 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 months versus signing it now? Why would you do it now? And I think if I were to make a prediction, I think it's going to take until, we hit the training camp or whenever the real fines start coming out for Trey Hendrickson. And I feel like that's going to kind of be the litmus test. But for me personally, I don't know if I see an end in sight soon, and I hope I do. I hope the Bengals can fix this and give him that contract extension and give him what he's asking for. But I think it's only going to get worse the longer you wait. So,
a lot of Bengals fans talk about the Bengals going all in, right? And what does going all in looks like? What does going all in? I hate that phrase. Yeah. I hate that phrase as well. But going all in is so subjective, that for terminology, that phrase, which you are asking the Bengals to do. But the Bengals, I think the Bengals can go all in their own way, and go all in. That means taking care of Trey Hendrickson, right? Because right now, what you're doing is you're robbing yourself of chemistry being built, the reps, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing that's important. You know who else this is unfair to? That nobody's talking about? Zach Taylor, who's entering a lame duck year.
Yeah.
This is unfair to Zach Taylor. This is the second year in a row Zach Taylor has to deal with off-season distractions that are things that are out of his control. And he's forced now to play the role of manager to a degree, managing both sides, because we don't hear from Duke Tobin after players get drafted and they're on the podium. That's it. We don't hear from the front office. Make no mistake about it, Zach Taylor is on the hot seat this year. Zach Taylor didn't get no reassurance that this was the year. Think about it. The teams that were, pretty much telling you that we believe in our coach, they let out notices. Typically what follows, if an organization believes in said staff, right? Let's say if I had a boss and it wasn't myself, and they cleared staff like they cleared staff here, and then it was just me here. Typically, what would follow is we believe in Malik's vision. We're excited about the new co-host that we've got coming in here, yada, yada, yada. That didn't happen for Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor is on the outs. There was no follow-up from the organization. It was all, we're pissed. We know we're better than this, and we expect with Joe Burrow to always be competitive. That's what followed. So the organization has talked about doing everything in their power to build a championship-level roster, but yet and still, we have another offseason of offseason distractions of things that are in their own control.
Yes.
Make it make sense to me, because it doesn't make sense to me. To me, I think that it hurts you not one bit by securing the service of Trey Hendrickson for 2 years. I think a 2-year deal makes very much sense. Even if you say the third year and we do, right, what everybody hates with the void year at the end of the contract, whatever the case may be. But technically, he's under contract for a year already. So if you sign him to a 2-year deal, that's 3 years. That's all the security that the guy could want. He can't physically expect the organization to guarantee beyond that. It's just not realistic. He's 31 years old, right? But at the same time, the organization has to give Zach Taylor something to work with. It's hard to sit up here and gauge Zach Taylor as a coach. It's not hard necessarily, but it's difficult at the same time because I feel like he's working with one arm tied behind his back, and maybe that's what it is with the Bengals organization. But I think that it's going to take a revolutionary type stance from the players in order for the organization to change. The Trey Hendrickson thing should have been done with long ago, which brings us to our next conversation. Is this a Super Bowl level roster? We've talked about the ultimate goal. We hear the whispers. We all know what Cincinnati fans want. We all know what Cincinnati fans need. We all know what the expectation is going into this year. But there's expectations and then there's reality. Is this a championship level roster as it currently stands? See, Daniel brought up something earlier. He brought up the offensive line. The offensive line is a big question mark. And I don't mean the two bookend tackles. I'm talking about the two guys that play guard. That's a question mark. That is a question mark. The defensive line right now, without Trey Hendrickson, without Shemar Stewart, is a question mark. And even with them, it's probably a question mark. But is this a championship level roster? I've got my thoughts. Before I give those thoughts, I want to let Evan give his thoughts.
I think this is a roster that can win the championship, but I don't think that necessarily means that they're a championship roster. And to expand upon that a little bit, I think you look at some of the other rosters in the NFL, Eagles, maybe the Bills, though they're a little thin at corner. They're not cracking the top 5 rosters. And there's an argument that if you kind of account for stars a little bit more and just look at the whole of the roster, there might be an argument they're outside the top 10 just because you have so much unproven talent in the rookies and guys like Miles Murphy and Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson that you're going to rely upon heavily that still have not played significant snaps that aren't rookies, but basically are, right? So you've got many new starters. You got many new question marks, and you were already rough last year. And I know some people will make the argument that, hey, like you were really unlucky last year, and that I would be the first to tell you that inherently you're generally going to creep toward average. But I think it would be a mistake to say that like the range of outcomes is, 0 being bad, 100 being the best outcome, and the bell curve falls in the middle around 50% where most of the outcomes. I think that shifted towards the lower end of the perspective because of all the rookies, the inexperience, and just the guys coming off injury. You got multiple starters in the secondary coming off injury. You got Geno Stone coming off a career worst year, and you're still trying to figure things out there. And you have no pass rush. And again, both of your alleged best edges, one of them definitely are not playing right now. So between all of that, I have a hard time saying that like, hey, you're one of those best 3 or 4 rosters total in the AFC, though I absolutely believe that this is a team that could be one of those teams that gets hot in the playoffs and wins 3-4 straight. That's absolutely in this team's repertoire, in their potential, especially because you have so much youth. The same way that in college football, they consider the second half of the season a lot, right? Because you see players develop so much in that first, 6, 7, 8 weeks as they figure out their identity and the offense figures out what works, right? So it's almost like that second half of the season is a different team. We see that a lot in the NFL a little bit with post-bye jumps for rookies where they kind of are just trying to get their head on straight, trying to catch up to the speed of the game. And then after the bye week, after 8, 9 weeks in the system, then they have time to really swallow it all, digest it, and go, okay, wow, like I understand this knowledge. I understand how to implement it now. And things slow down for them a little bit. That could definitely happen with this team. That is absolutely in the realm of possibility, but I'm going to hope for it. I'm not going to bet on it. And so I say, like, yeah, this is absolutely a team that could win the wild card or sneak in just above the wild card and absolutely be one of the most threatening teams in the NFL. But if you're asking me to just evaluate where their roster is on a week in, week out basis, I definitely think it's fair to look at a couple different positions like the starting guards. Who is your inline tight end? Because Mike Gesicki is a wide receiver. Like, are we going to be relying on Drew Sample that much? Because Eric All, man, the way they were using him was awesome. It sucks that he's hurt. I don't think he's going to be back in a position to play anytime soon where he can contribute. So that's what sucks about it is I look at the tight end, the guards, corners coming off of injury, defensive line is missing so much pass rush. Linebackers are a lot of rookies. It's tough, man. You got a lot of turnover and a lot of question marks, and the likelihood that all of those coins that you're flipping in the air end up heads, it's tough, man. It can happen, but it's just a low percentage.
Yeah, I think in general, I think you really said it well. This is a team that's totally capable of winning the Super Bowl because we saw them almost do it before. But their roster is not the best. I don't think anybody's going to sit here and argue, 53-man roster, the Bengals have one of the better in the league. I don't think there's anybody that firmly believes that because they just don't, and getting more into football and coaching and all these things, like you really try to look at a roster and evaluate it as a whole, and you really try to find matchups, positions of weakness, people that you can pick on. And the Bengals, unfortunately, have a ton of those. And that's the part where you're like, okay, yes, we have a really good top-heavy roster, but you have, like Evan said, you have guards that can be picked on. We have struggled with stunting the defensive line and picking that up for years, and that has always been something that has killed them. The secondary, this gotten beat on double moves time and time again. The big plays have been given up time and time again. There's so many ways that you can pick on the Bengals on both sides of the ball. That doesn't mean that Joe Burrow's not going to go over 400 yards and have us in a position to win the game, because that can happen no matter what. But again, when you're just truly evaluating the roster and everything, there are plenty of areas that teams like, I like our matchup here, there. They suck at this, they suck at that. Let's just do that for 4 quarters and hope Joe Burrow doesn't play absolutely perfect football from the time the clock starts to the time ends. And, as phenomenal as Joe Burrow is, to do that all year long and to win a Super Bowl is damn near impossible. Well, maybe he does it. Who knows? But who knows? Maybe the roster. There's just so many questions. There's so many things that are like, yeah, it could. Our secondary could be good. Our linebacker unit could be good. Our offensive line could be improved. But there's nothing from last year going into this year that you're 100% confident in being better. We want Al Golden to be a great defensive coordinator. That would be awesome. We want this young secondary to take leaps and stay healthy. That would be awesome. We want Miles Murphy, Joseph Asai to take these leaps. That would be awesome. But there's no definite answers on this team outside of the top heaviness of the roster. And if we're comparing the top 5 players on every team, sure, we can be up there and we can conversate. We can argue with anybody. But again, that's not how the game is played. You got a 53-man roster for a reason. All these people make plays. Your backups make plays. Your depth gets tested time and time and time again. And the Bengals are not suited to have sustained success over a large period of time right now.
Yeah, just one final thing. I think you guys both said it great. That's kind of where I'm at with this is when you look at how the Bengals are going to do late in the season, they've done well late in the season. That's even with injuries, right? And that's even with a poor depth chart behind the starters at times. So I think that's the one thing that kind of should give Bengals fans hope. And once again, it is very, very rare that you have a top 5 quarterback on a team. It is very rare. A lot of teams go their entire 10, 15 years with a Jared Goff level, with a Tua level, with a Jimmy Garoppolo level. That is a ton of teams. So the Bengals have the X factor in Joe Burrow, But my struggle and I think my frustration is when you point at every team that's kind of, made the Super Bowl or even won the Super Bowl, they've got something that is their X factor. They have a unit, that is whether their offense is a dominant offense and they have an excellent defense coordinator, or the opposite, Eagles, right? A dominant defense with the offense with some question marks. I just haven't seen that yet. And I think that this Bengals team, it is going to be a learning on the fly especially for this defense. And I think that it is going to take a true work of art from Al Golden to really say, hey, get this defense right into the playoffs. Because once again, I'm sure we can all, say the same thing. If Joe Burrow's in the playoffs, you have a chance.
My honest assessment on that is I think if the Bengals were one of the hottest teams in football down the stretch last year.
Yeah.
I think if they would have made it in the playoffs, I think they would have went deep because I think they were playing that well football. The defense got simplified. That all being said, I don't want to make it doom and gloom. We have seen teams that don't have the greatest of defenses still go to the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs are one of those teams. The offense has the ability to be a top 3 offense in the National Football League this year. If Germaine Burton, from what we've seen, is the Germaine Burton that we see during the season, sort of a lot of stuff that Evan and I were talking about when the Bengals first drafted him. If they get that player that is focused, that is locked in, holy hell, the Bengals offense is going to look phenomenal. It's going to look unstoppable. I imagine you're going to have a hard time keeping that guy off the football field. And then Yoshi Voss looks like he's taking the next step. We'll see. He always looks great in, preseason, the training camp and stuff like that. So I expect him to continue to, the upward trajectory that is sending to be that ascending talent. But I think that this offense is the Bengals calling card. I think the offense is going to be the best unit because that is where a lot of the money has been tied up into. So that's what you expect. The biggest question mark for me is the offensive guard spot. We have not talked about that at length, but I need to talk about it, though. Lucas Patrick and Cody Ford, the fact that there's a battle between those two is interesting to me. What I will say is Cody Ford did look his best at guard this year. He did look his best at guard. That's not saying a crap ton, but I guess it's something to hang your hat on to a degree. Joe Burrow still played phenomenal with guys like Cody Ford and Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa being hobbled out there working for him. So I have no concerns if Cody Ford is the starting guard. Who's going to be that other guard? Is it going to be a Dylan Fairchild? Right? Who's going to be that other guard? It's kind of been very quiet on that end. We don't know what that looks like, but the guard spot is definitely a sore spot where we're looking at it and we're saying, okay, what is that going to look like? It was nice to hear Al Golden talk today and talk about how, you see some of the ascension from some of the young players, guys like Chris Jenkins, right? Mm-hmm. You need Chris Jenkins to step up. Yeah. You need Chris Jenkins to be a dude because that's why you drafted him in the second round. You're hoping that he takes that next step forward. He really raved about TJ Slayton. He raved about him. He talked about his work ethic, his consistency, and he said he transforms them as a unit. So I'm just very curious, how is this defense going to look from the interior spot? Because how do you get TJ Slayton, McKinley Jackson, BJ Hill, and Chris Jenkins all on the field? How does it happen? Is TJ Slayton only out there for the first and second down? And then what happens? You put BJ Hill and Chris Jenkins in there to rush the passer? Or where does McKinley Jackson snaps come from? Right? What happens with Myles Murphy? Was Myles Murphy out? Because you got to imagine when healthy, the starters are probably going to look like Trey Hendrickson and Shemar Stewart or Joseph Osai. I don't know what this is going to look like. This is going to be interesting to me. I have no idea how you're going to – because I feel like how I felt a while ago. I feel like you have a lot of players that are very similar, if that makes sense. You have a lot of players on the defensive line that are very similar. That's how I felt as the receiver. Before they drafted Germaine Burton, what was one of my biggest gripes, Evan? The receivers after Jamar Chase and Higgins looked all the same.
They just had a bunch of X receivers, a bunch of possession guys,
Yeah.
except for Charlie Jones, but he hadn't been on the field except for 16 snaps in the last game of the season.
So for me, it's like outside of Trey Hendrickson. That's why you need – Trey Hendrickson is the only quote-unquote game-changing defensive line player right now.
Mm-hmm.
Shemar Stewart could potentially be that, but then he also rookie. So
what if he looks like Myles Murphy's rookie?
Exactly.
There's and that's not to disparage either of them. That's just like, hey, it's fucking hard to be a rookie and it's hard to be a good rookie. It's tough, right, man? So that's where it's like, okay, well, shit, dude. And especially the fact that he needs the reps, he needs the polish, he needs the practice, he needs to figure out how to use the tools in his bag to effectively, consistently get to the quarterback and have better tackling form and better leverage and understand where the ball is on any given play. And that's the upsetting part about all this. And I'm not trying to broach the subject too heavy here on the Shemar Stewart stuff, but yeah, it's absolutely part of it that you're sitting here with both of your defensive ends when you desperately need pass rush. essentially Trey Hendrickson's under contract, but he's willing to not play according to what he's saying right now. So what are we doing here?
Yeah. And honestly speaking, I believe that I don't think Shemar Stewart is going to look like him. The reason why is because I think Shemar Stewart is a true demon at pass rusher. I believe that. I think he needs his finishing ability, but he's disruptive. That's what his calling card is. He can really beat his man off the line of scrimmage. He's literally explosive. He's great. I don't know if the production is going to be there. I expect him to be a better pro than he was a college player. But that being said, as a rookie, expecting that leap, I don't know. I felt like Al Golden's comments when he was asked about Myles Murphy was a little interesting. I don't know if you guys got a chance to catch that, but he said pretty much, hey, it's time for Myles to step up, right? I think we can all agree it's time. I think Jerry does a great job working with those guys. It's like, well, you talked about Joseph Ossai taking advantage of the reps because a guy like Trey Hendrickson is out there, but you're not raving about Myles Murphy, and he's definitely getting those reps and those opportunities with Trey Hendrickson not being out there. Is he taking that next step? He said he thinks that the game is going to slow down for Myles now. He thinks that things are going to slow down for Myles.
I hope so.
He said that what they've been working on with Myles is his pass rush repertoire, meaning after that first move, what's the second move? How are you gonna beat off?
What do you have besides long arm and bull rush? What
Right.
do you do? Yeah,
He
what's
said
the counter off that?
He said he has elite speed. He has said all the right things, you know. Yeah, like he said that. If you go back and watch, he said he has elite speed. He has that ability. He's just big out there. He's strong. He's physical.
I agree with the big and strong and the power profile. I just don't quite see
the elite speed aspect.
I don't see the elite speed aspect.
So for me, I think that we need to. I have a lot of questions about the defensive line and who's going to step up. The one thing that was very good to hear from Al Golden is it seems like they're giving everybody opportunities to work in different areas. He said defensive ends working on the inside. He said inside guys working on the outside.
A little less fan of that.
I mean, I
don't really need to see McKinley Jackson lining up at head over tackle.
Chris Jenkins can though.
Yeah, Chris Jenkins maybe.
Chris I can get on board with. Yeah, that's about it.
But I like the idea of Myles Murphy working on the inside. I love that idea. The power, the bull rush, the strength, the ability to affect the pocket. Just getting his arms up if he's not able to get to the quarterback. I like those ideas. Those are things they're saying. He says stuff about corners playing safeties. Safeties playing corner.
I can see that a little more with like maybe Dax Hill having that kind of cross training through his career and kind of doing some stuff. But man, inverted coverage always scares me.
Yeah.
You can align differently to kind of soften it a little bit and make it a little less extreme, but then you disguise it a little bit less. But
for me, the big
I like the versatility idea. I like that. Yeah.
But for me, it's like all the defensive guys, respectfully, most of the defensive guys, especially on the back end, basically told on themselves last year. They said we're not smart enough to retain the playbook and everything is just too overcomplicated for us. So now you're asking them to do more. So they're not.
Well, I think maybe you're simplifying the responsibilities and the scheme overall, but you're kind of diversifying the perspectives that people have. And I think there's an advantage of that in the sense of knowing what the guys around you are doing probably gives you more confidence to pursue your avenue, to trust that other people have their responsibilities covered. I think it probably gives you a better idea of how the defense is functioning as a whole. And maybe that unlocks those plays where if you don't see anybody releasing, let's say you're the flat defender, you're covering, no one releases into the flat, you understand better that like, hey, the guys behind me and the guys to my right, they have this area covered. I can release, I can go apply pressure, I can go find somebody. I feel more confident to leave where I'm at and not just guard grass, right? Maybe those are the kind of situations it unlocks. Maybe it helps them understand the gaps a little bit better in their run defense. I do think there's probably some benefit or positivity there, but I do hear your concerns of, hey, if it was already too complicated, why are we learning multiple positions?
So I want to ask you a question. We've talked about everything under the sun, right? In terms of the roster, unless there's a position I'm missing. Well, there's two things I want to ask. Do we think Geno Stone picks it up where he left it off last year? Before you answer that, Evan and Logan and Daniel, make sure you guys do us a huge favor. If this is your first time watching the channel, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN newly minted studio, because this is a newly minted studio. It's pretty sick down here. But I got to ask that question. Do we think Geno Stone is going to be that guy this year for the Cincinnati Bengals? I got to ask you, one of you two. Daniel, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can be fine. I think he could be good.
Before you continue,
Yeah.
you were very high on him when he
Yeah.
first got signed by the Bengals, and you talked about one thing you said about Geno Stone that was very poignant for me. You said that Geno Stone's interceptions they weren't luck. He always found himself in the right position at the right time, which added right to the thought process that maybe the defense was complicated for him last year because once they simplified the playbook, we started seeing the numbers go up. He finished with how many interceptions?
3.
Finished with 4.
He finished with 4 interceptions, and a lot of those came down the stretch when the defense was simplified. I got to get your opinion on this, Daniel. Being a guy that did a film breakdown on Geno Stone, so high on him coming from the Baltimore system, do you think that Geno Stone's best Bengals football is ahead of him?
Oh, for sure. I think his best Bengals football, 1,000% is ahead of him. And I think maybe that's what, we should be looking at is, hey, maybe we don't have these crazy high expectations, because I did think that looking at who he was playing alongside in Baltimore helped out a ton. And I think that's also going to put a lot of pressure also on Jordan Battle. I think Jordan Battle has a big opportunity ahead of him this season. And Geno Stone did show some things last year. I think the biggest concern obviously is was the lack of an oomph in the run game, was a poor, angles in the run game. You could tell his elite speed, it just was not there in the running game. I think that we could see some very good things with him in coverage as the single high safety, as the last line of defense. I think that's where he's best. And he also showed late down the season that he made some big time plays in the run game as well. I forgot who it was, but it was a crosser, and he had one of the biggest hits of the entire season. So I think that his best Bengals football is ahead of him for sure. What that really entails, I don't really know his ceiling, but I think, and this goes with the safety position in general, it really, in my opinion, is going to come down to that defensive line. If the defensive line can show up, I think we're really going to see a very, very productive Geno Stone. If the defensive line looks like a bottom 5 unit, I think Geno Stone will look very poor this season. And that's how I view him. So.
I think with the safety position in general, they see everything in front of them. Everything, there's nothing ever behind them pre-snap. Everything's in front of them. They see everybody. And, when you are constantly viewing everybody, you get used to, okay, he's my corner. He's pretty good. My linebackers over here kind of stink. This guy over here, whatever. Like, you kind of know, you know what you're working with in front of you. So, you kind of know where you need to be, who's good at what. You're seeing everything unfold. And then there's a lot of turnover. Your good corner that you can count on that side goes down. Your linebacker that you count on always to make the right reads and go fill the holes goes down. You're like, okay, now do I need to go out? Do I need to play the run a little more aggressively? Do I need to stay back in coverage because this guy's hurt, that guy's hurt? There was a lot of moving parts in front of Geno Stone last year. And obviously injuries piled up. That's a thing that's going to happen. That's a thing that can happen every single year, no matter what team you are. But again, we just talked about Germaine Pratt and how the linebackers were last year. They weren't very good. So now he's like, okay, I probably need to be a little more aggressive coming downhill. That's not my strength. I need to, take a step up. I need to think about it a little more. But now, oh crap, can't tell that Brett's getting burned over here. Whoever's over here is getting burnt too. Now I feel like he was constantly kind of getting stuck a little bit, trying to make up for this and that, and just being able to play more freely at the safety position is hopefully that's something, it seems like something that Al has always kind of let his safeties do, which could be a great thing for him. But again, it's just going to come down to how he's used. And I think that's kind of how the case is with all the safeties, because I think Jordan Battle's a hell of a player, but maybe Lou sees him better as that, that roamer versus Geno Stone, whatever it is. It's just, I think Geno Stone is a fine football player. I think he will not be as bad as he was to start the year. He probably won't be as good as he was to end the year, but I think he will be a solid player this year. I like the secondary with Al Golden and what he does with the safeties. I trust that to make Geno Stone more of an average player for a whole season instead of a super up and down, peaks and valley kind of guy.
One thing I will say, a couple things I want to touch on. Hopefully this is the return of Logan and his awesome Cincinnati shirts. Because remember, he had a thing going on before I forget. Logan used to wear his Cincinnati shirts all the time, and they were sick ones. He started it when we were with before, but then we had to.
He's got a lot more jackets and sweatshirts, man. Maybe the colder weather, he'll get back into it a little more.
Because I was coming to football, and I was like, I gotta bring something today. I can't keep showing up in my football shirts. Like I feel gross. So.
But one thing I want to touch on really quickly. I see some people in the comment section saying Lou sucked and all that. I want to touch on this really, really quickly, and I think this will kind of give you some insight. So I've actually talked with some people this summer, to gain a little bit more insight on what exactly took place in Cincinnati. Turns out Lou knew, well, the Bengals informed Lou Anarumo that he would not be returning as a defensive coordinator all the way back to in the last game against the Steelers, the first game against the Steelers, where Russell Wilson had an amazing performance. He was basically told he was going to finish out the season. And, you know, but there was going to be changes made to the staff at that point. They both agreed that it probably makes best sense. You know, Lou obviously wanted to be head coach at some point, get an opportunity, and felt like maybe, you know, the marriage with Cincinnati kind of, it is what it is. They need to make a change. He probably thought he didn't give any pushback. So, you know, I would say one of the last gifts that Lou Anarumo gave to the Bengals organization, what people don't know, is Zach and Lou are still very close. I talked with several people that are in the know, and what I was told was Lou actually recommended Al Golden be his replacement. Lou told Zach to hire Al Golden as a defensive coordinator, not the other way around. It wasn't like, you know, he was bamboozled and they had just hired a guy that was his linebackers coach from a couple years ago. Lou actually made the recommendation, if you're going to move on from me, you should hire Al Golden. I was taken back when I heard that. They said, so he always had Cincinnati's best interest in mind. And I thought that was some great insight to hear. That all being said, when we say people suck, I want to remind you of things. You know, you think about it, when coaches get an opportunity, you have coaches that are good at certain things. Most coaches start off as what? Position coaches, right? Lou's calling card was always the secondary. He was a defensive backs coach. He was the reason why the Miami Dolphins drafted Xavier Howard. He stood on the table for him. He's always been able to work miracles with defensive backs. He helped Eli Apple in his career turn around. Al Golden has always been good with linebackers and the front four and all that kind of stuff like that. You know, so while I think that you gain a lot with, I think you gain a lot with Al Golden, I think you lose maybe you don't. I don't know, because you got guys who've been in the secondary now with this group for a little bit. But I think that your hope as a defensive coordinator is that you pass off certain abilities off to your position coaches and you allow them to sort of maximize the most opportunity so you can focus on the overall, you know, the overall group as a whole, right? Not just one specific group. If you're a defensive backs coach, you're going to lean towards working with defensive backs, and you're going to give your defensive line coach, your linebackers coach, a little bit more freedom to do what it is that they might do. Now, if you have a very experienced linebackers coach like Al Golden, who's almost like another defensive coordinator than you had a Mark Duffner at the time, those are guys that know what they are talking about. Those are guys that know how to kind of go about their business. So you have a lot of pieces in place, and those guys are able to work as a pretty much carry your message out, your voice out, right? And it works as a phenomenal unit. You're able to sort of focus in on certain position groups. If you have an experience in those positions, like those happened over the years, people got poached from that stab. Well, you have to then stretch your arms a little bit more wider. The whole point I'm trying to say that is every coach, from a Zach Taylor, from a Dan Pitcher, they all have skill sets. They all have specialties that they work with that got them to where they are. And that's fine. That's a part of the process. That does not mean one guy sucks. I think Lou Anarumo was one of the best at confusing a Mahomes, right? When you consider you always had a Trey Hendrickson, but you also had a Sam Hubbard whose job wasn't necessarily the best at rushing the passer and getting there right away. He was good at stopping the run. Lou was able to get the most out of him because of his ability to confuse a lot of these quarterbacks on the back end with his coverage. So I just want to make sure we get that out there. You know, I think a lot of coaches in the National Football League, I think a lot of coaches are great coaches, but it's about, do you have the personnel to help things, you know, when things get hairy? I believe Frank Pollock might have been a better offensive line coach than what people gave him credit for. He proved that in Dallas. There's a reason why that guy kept getting a job in the National Football League. I don't think he's a terrible, maybe he's not, maybe he lost his chops now. I have no idea. Maybe he just didn't fit with the offensive coordinators or the head coach that work. I know him and Zach, but it heads a lot. That's fine. But I do think that we got to give a little grace when it comes to some of these coaches. I think all around the league, when you look at players, these coaches just don't forget how to coach. Sometimes it's fit that doesn't matter. Sometimes personnel doesn't fit. There are different reasons. I believe that Lou's going to be in a better situation in Indianapolis for him. We'll figure out. We'll find out what that looks like. I think Al Golden is a good piece for the Bengals unit. You could see in Lou's defense, right? guys, like linebacker outside of Logan Wilson, and it wasn't a huge emphasis put on that. It was more so secondary that was put on it. But you see where Al Golden comes in, and what does he do immediately? He upgrades the linebacker position. He makes it a focal point. He says speed at the linebacker. He believes linebackers make the plays. A lot of these coaches have DNAs, and they're telling you right away, this is what I believe. This is the position group that I think that's going to unlock the key to our defense. So Al Golden is pretty much telling you, hey, linebacker is going to be the key to our defense. We need to have fast, physical linebackers and guys that can rush the passer, that can cover out in space, that can tackle.
Or a safety, or a Jesse,
safety,
or a Bates,
right?
Or a one of those guys. Yeah, it'd be great to have one of those, wouldn't it?
100%. I think that when you look at it, I think that a lot of these coaches have different specialties, and I think that if we just kind of peel the curtain back a little bit, and we realize it's like, holy shit, they do have groups that they favor over other groups. Like if you have a defensive line coach, that's why a lot of defensive line coaches don't get hired as defensive coordinators. It's the reason why. It's because you usually see linebacker coaches, right, or secondary coaches get hired as defense. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm gonna tell you guys a secret about football, and I've learned this over my years. The easiest position to coach on the defense is defensive line. That does not mean you're always going to get the most production, but it's respectfully, it's where you don't have to think a lot. You don't have to think a lot. It's about controlling your gap, rush the passer, stay there, hold your guy. That's really it. The linebackers, they have coverage responsibilities, run fits, pass fits, secondary coach. Oh, fuck, that's hell. You have so much to think about. You have to think about the safeties, the corners. You need to make sure guys are playing with the right depth. There's so much more intricate. It's the reason why you see guys advance in the NFL at linebacker spots or cornerback spots. And usually the defensive line coaches are defensive line coaches, lifers for a while. It's very similar, very rare, right? If you notice this, Evan and Logan and Daniel, offensive line coaches usually don't get a lot of nods as offensive coordinators often. Their job, I think, is a little bit more intricate than defensive line coaches, but they respectfully, they think that offensive line coaches and defensive line coaches have the easiest job because you don't really have to worry about the coverage responsibilities or anything else beyond the line of scrimmage. So for me, I think that coaching football, being around the game, you learn a whole lot. You just learn a whole lot more. Again, if you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. I want to keep the conversation rolling. Shemar Stewart calls out Bengals, guys. And I quote, they're more interested in winning, what did he say, the negotiating battle or something along those
arguments.
lines?
They're more interested in winning arguments than games.
Winning games. I thought that was very interesting. I thought that was a very mature response as a rookie. I couldn't believe I actually heard him say that. What were you guys' thoughts when you heard Shemar Stewart calling out the organization and pretty much being straight to the point, saying, hey, I want to be out there with my teammates. I want to play. Al Golden raved about him and said he's engaging in meetings and stuff like that. But what were your thoughts when you heard that? Evan, what are your thoughts?
Look, I've heard people suppose that, hey, he's a rookie. He hasn't played. He has no right to say this. Like Trey or Jamar or Joe could have said that. I think that's bullshit right away. If you went into a job, whether you were 2 weeks in, 2 months in, 3 months in, if you were getting shafted by the company and they were doing you dirty, you'd be pissed and you say something. They don't tell you, oh yeah, no, you're getting screwed. They're not giving you enough on your paycheck or they're not giving you what they were supposed to. And suddenly you're just like, no, but you've only been here for 3 or 4 months. So you can't say anything about it. Keep your mouth shut. Like, no, miss me with all that. Man, it's just every situation is not black and white. And every situation is different, but it really says something that you constantly put yourself in these situations, that you're constantly battling with your star players, premium picks, guys who are supposed to be cornerstones of your franchise. Even the easy sign this guy signings with Jamar had their circus. Trey has had his circus throughout his time, even though he's earned his piece, right? T. Higgins, obviously that whole saga. So like eventually it's like, hey, it might be you, right? And I think this is I thought that was a very succinct way to put it. They want to litigate. They are lawyers. Their job for this organization for many years, like you said, just like a defensive coordinator has their preference, has their role. Their role has been to litigate, to be the contract hawks for many years now. And they are stuck in that mode to where T. Higgins and Jesse Bates and all these guys are walking out with their heads held down, frustrated, and they're sitting there clapping and high-fiving going, we're winning this negotiation. We're winning this argument. Because the thought of losing quote unquote losing a contract negotiation as if it's a zero-sum game, losing 60-40 to a player, conceding a little bit, being like, hey, this isn't the deal we wanted, but we gave up maybe 20% of what we wanted. And sure, they won the deal a little bit more than we did, but we still get a great player for a pretty good deal. That's winning to me. That's a win-lose. That's not a lose. But it feels like every single one of these, they have to just win the entirety of this proverbial argument, even when you have the money. Even when you're able to do this. And again, we come back to Shemar Stewart and say, this contract's already guaranteed. Oh, well, other teams have this language in some cases, and, they just want to get this in right now. Okay, well, he's not the one. He said he's not the one.
Yep.
And the problem with this is I understand that it's like, hey, if you do something bad enough to get suspended, if we have a Henry Ruggs situation, right? They want to be able to void that contract. It's not that specific. Where if they deem conduct detrimental to the team because you arrived to a meeting late, because you're not in uniform in the socks or the jersey that you want tucked in, they can declare conduct detrimental to the team. Could that void it? I don't know. Is there precedent for that? But that's the thing, is why would you expose yourself to that risk?
Yeah.
And again, we're talking about $10-15 million to billionaires. That's what this comes down to, man. And again, you're talking about the difference of like 11 weeks to 30 years. Like that's the difference in million to billion. And we're talking about this shit. Like, pay your player the same way you did your last first round picks. You already don't give good guarantees. You already have not many of the benefits that other teams have. Why are we doing this circus? Why are we doing this now? You do this maybe with Dax Hill when you have Jesse Bates ready to go, right? You don't do this when you desperately need your first round edge player out there, when you're fighting with your other star edge player who's not going to be there and is your only source of pass rush. You as an organization have no leverage for this situation right now. So maybe Shemar Stewart sits out, loses a year of eligibility, and declares, okay, he's young. He's fine. Like, sure, he misses out on $10 million this year for, whatever signing bonus he could have got. He'll get drafted again next year. First round, second round, sure, maybe. Yeah, you'll lose a little bit of money, but then he won't feel like he's at odds with an organization the day he gets there.
That happens? Wait, that happens?
I know, right? It's crazy.
Wait,
yeah.
what?
Wait.
No,
I think he's talking about like if he doesn't sign, he goes back in the draft, right? That's what
Yeah.
No,
Really?
If you're drafted and you don't sign your rookie contract, you can get back into the draft.
That's crazy. I did not know that. The more you learn.
Yeah, no,
I did not know that. Okay.
No, but it just doesn't get done because, again, since 2011, they've given you a structure for all of these contracts.
Yeah.
It's cookie cutter. It's easy. It's boilerplate.
Yeah.
Like, usually when they're talking about language, offsetting language to void guarantees, they're talking about, hey, you like really fucked up, like really bad to where you're probably out of the league, or like, hey, you really were really, really, really bad, and we're going to cut you anyways. And let's be honest, after the third year, it's team options. You're picking up options on the player's contract after so like, you're not going to cut this guy in the first 2 years anyway. What are we fucking talking about here?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I think the 2 points I'll make with this is, first off, and it's not obviously as clear as day, but how is this the guy? This is your first round pick. If you're confident in him, you drafted him. And now you're kind of backpedaling. So this shows me a couple things. Either the ownership and the GM, Duke Tobin, they're not on the same page. Or they just don't trust that something bad might happen. And that's the frustrating thing. This is a first-round pick. This is your prized possession of the entire offseason. You spend so much money allocated towards, or you should be spending so much money towards scouting, towards sending your scouts here, towards the GM. Hey, this is Duke Tobin. This is your responsibility. This is your guy. The first round pick is your poster boy of your entire draft process. And if you're not sold on him, what are we doing? And listen, I understand maybe they're trying to cover their ass, sure. But if you are not sold on him to a point where, hey, you are hurting your team right now, because that's the truth. You are hurting the team by Shemar Stewart not being out there. what are we doing? And like I said, I think it's the frustrating part because Shemar Stewart even said, hey, he's got the backing of the star players in the locker room. So if the players are saying this is a distraction, this is a major distraction, especially if this is the guy that you're potentially drafting to replace a Trey Hendrickson, right? If that's your plan, you're not signing Trey Hendrickson. Okay, then put all your marbles in the Shemar Stewart basket, but you're losing on valuable reps, and it's just a frustrating situation.
Try this with Miles Murphy. It was a back end of the first round pick, and then that's a guy who you already have Trey Hendrickson under contract, and he was playing and happy at the time. And then you have Sam Hubbard, who's clearly going to be your starter for at least the next 2 years at that point, right? So like that would be an opportunity of like, hey, if this guy wants to sit out for part of the season, we're okay. We're not in a spot where we're going week 3. Oh crap. Trey Hendrickson and Shemar Stewart aren't out there, and we got Chris Jenkins jumping out to edge to fill in some snaps. Like, I just, it's again, the Trey thing. I think it's stupid. I've said plenty of times, hey, you can give him a 3-year extension, and this is napkin math, right? But like, give him a 3-year, $90 million extension, right? $60 million guaranteed for a signing bonus. That's $15 million a year you can prorate for the signing bonus.
Right.
Then he's getting $31 million a year this year against the cap. That's the money he wants. And guess what? You're paying him less than that in the mid-20s every other year that you might have concern that he would fall off. But we don't think he's going to fall off right now. So go ahead and pay the 30 for him this year, and then you get him at 25, 24, 23, and you can stack all that guaranteed money up in this year and next year. So, hey, guess what? If year 3 and year 4 of that contract roll around, you can have minimal guaranteed money to where, hey, if Trey Hendrickson works out, we got him on a steal. And if he doesn't, then yeah, we incur a $6-8 million dead cap hit. But okay, at least we made that investment because, again, going back to, you got $30 million in cap space already. What are you doing with it?
Right.
How are you making your team better this year? What are you doing with that money that is going to make you better this year or next year for going to the Super Bowl? And I don't see a single thing they can point to that is telling me. We're not out there like, oh, they're talking to these agents or these free agents. They're talking to these guys who got cut. They're talking to this guy and that guy to round out their offensive line or defensive line room. So what are you doing? Because if you're just sitting there on your hands, holding on to the money, you're not doing anything. You can't tell me that you're dedicated to winning. You're not using every avenue and resource that you need to do when you're a smaller organization that already hamstrings yourself.
Right.
You have to be hyper efficient or very good in all the other areas to make up for your deficiencies. You can't be playing these fucking games with your draft picks. You need them. That's the position you've put yourself in. You don't have the leverage or the leeway to play these fucking games. It's really frustrating.
Yeah. One last thing I think is interesting. I mean, we talked about this on the show, you know, when we talk about the NBA versus the NFL. NBA really is a players-driven league. And I think the one thing looking at Shemar that is fascinating, just look at is, hey, this is a player looking out for himself. And this, it's not to say he's not a team player, but this is him covering his ass as he should. This is your livelihood. This is your chance to make your money. And if somebody's saying, hey, we can cut your contract after 1 year because we feel a certain way, Shemar Stewart is totally right. And I think that this should just go to show that, hey, players are allowed to focus on themselves. Maybe he's going a little too far, whatever.
No, he's not.
But he is allowed to focus on himself because at the end of the day, this is his livelihood. And as we've talked about, a lot of positions, whether it's running back, they've got 4 to 8 years to, if you're lucky, 12 years to really make money for the rest of your life. And he should cover his ass, and he's not wrong.
Yeah. So someone asked a question to me up here. Tom Jones, appreciate you, Tom. He says, Malik, do you think Trey will actually sit out a game or two to make his point? Let me be very, very clear, and I have this on good authority. I think Trey Hendrickson is extremely serious about sitting out. I'll go as far as to say this: I don't think Trey Hendrickson plays another snap for the Cincinnati Bengals unless the deal does get done. I think he's extremely serious about it. It's about principles for him. You cannot tell him you're going to sign him and then you choose not to. This is not a battle the Bengals are going to win, guys. This is not a battle the Bengals are going to win.
What are you protecting yourself from? You had what? David Pollock?
Yeah.
That's because you had a guy 20 years ago that was a first round pick that didn't work out for you, that you probably would have wanted to get out of that contract in the first 2 years. Like, what are you insulating yourself for? Like, it is by those odds, it's a 1 in 20 chance that there's something that's going to happen here. And again, we're talking about what, $15, $20 million? Yeah. Like, again, in the grand scheme of things across the entire contract, like what What are we doing?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's unfortunate because it's a situation that could be resolved fairly quickly. It's just about egos. And I honestly think that at the end of the day, it's gotta be figured out by the Bengals. They have to figure the situation out. So we'll see what sort of takes place here. But they need to wrap this up pretty quickly with Shemar Stewart and with Trey Hendrickson. I don't think that the Bengals are going to win either of these, to be honest with you. I think that this is an offseason in which the curtain was peeled back on the organization. Their hand was forced with T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson.
And that's concerning because they have to win.
Yeah.
They have a deep-seated need
Yeah.
in their bones to win every negotiation,
what
disagreement.
I'm gonna give a hot take here. I think the Bengals' ego is hurt. I think that Rocky, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase twisted their arm, and they didn't like that they got their arm twisted.
Louder.
I don't think that they like the fact that they lost a negotiation. I don't, even though T. Higgins' contract was so loudly, I don't think that they lost that. And I think that they're trying to gain leverage back because they want to show, if you think about how Mike Brown has always operated, you will honor your contract, whether it's a Carson Palmer, whether it's a Carlos Dunlap. Carlos Dunlap had to be so egregious and so disrespectful to the organization, to the coaching staff, showing up late to me. You guys don't even know the half of it. Showing up late to meetings, saying while they're doing a meeting, while they're talking, oh, we don't care. Like being completely disruptive towards this coaching staff and so disrespectful to the coaches because he wanted out. Calling the organization out, talking about how, playing the race card almost and saying, hey, they don't really stand for black athletes. And then that's why they did the whole campaign where they were outside, it was a whole big ordeal. Joe Burrow had to be a spokesperson. They don't like the fact that they lost, and they don't like the fact that they lost so publicly and so embarrassingly. And so this is the players sort of creating a revolution because you had Joe Burrow speaking to media, you had Trey Hendrickson speaking to media. Mm-hmm. This is them trying to make an example.
Yeah.
And I feel like at what point does the cost at what point does winning become the focal point? At what point does egos and all that stuff get stripped aside, and are you serious about winning a championship? To me, at the end of the day, you win a championship, none of this shit really matters. Because that's what the end goal is. That is why you pay the players. That's why you have an NFL team. That is why you fill the stadium, and that's why you've invested so much in your quarterback. If you didn't care about winning, guess what? You probably wouldn't care about drafting Joe Burrow. You wouldn't care about any of this. You would continue to, because Bengals fans are still going to support. Bengals fans are still going to be in the stadium. It might not be as packed, but at the end of the thing, but at the end of the day, you have to do what's in the best interest of the overall football team, this city, these players. And I think that Trey Hendrickson is doing right by standing his ground. People could feel the way that they feel. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Tom Jones says, why aren't the reporters trying to get interviews with Katie, Mike, or Duke? I highly doubt that they're not trying to get those. They can put in requests all they want, but the Bengals have the ability to decline. I know that the Bengals do decline those interview requests. The fact of the matter is, until there is an answer, you will not hear from them. I believe how this is going to end. This is not me breaking news. This is how I believe this is going to end. I think it's going to end with a Trey Hendrickson press conference and Trey Hendrickson a contract extension being announced. Will that contract extension be announced before the season starts? Regardless, that situation needs to be worked out immediately. And I think it's in the Bengals' best interest to work that situation out before TJ Watt situation gets worked out, as I alluded to earlier. But there's a lot of back and forth jockeying for position here. And I don't think the Bengals realize they're not in a position to play this game and play this game long as they have been playing. Last thing I want to touch on before we get out of here, guys, is the Bengals have made some changes, right? They made some changes to the practice time and all this stuff. You're hoping that it results in a faster start, a quicker start for these players, and we start to see a different level of intensity out of this team from start to finish. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. As you guys know on this show, we'll continue to have it covered. We'll continue to talk it through. We'll continue to have the conversation. But I think that I don't think any fan, anybody should be rude to these players for doing what's in their best interest, specifically for the Trey Hendrickson situation. I don't like the fact that the notion about Trey Hendrickson has been, it's Trey Hendrickson complaining again. I don't think that his agent did him any favors last offseason, trying to get a new deal. It just wasn't the right time. I do think that Trey Hendrickson is 100% in the right now. You cannot tell a player that we're going to take care of you, and then when it comes time, because you didn't like the way the Trey Hendrickson, the T. Higgins and Jamar Chase thing went down, you're pretty much going back on your word. And as a replacement, as a thought, because you panicked, you draft another defensive end who you're basically saying could be our defensive end of the future if things don't work out with this guy. That is not how this thing works. And now you're in a dispute with this guy over language in a contract. Listen, at the end of the day,
better remember he's gonna remember that when contract time comes
Oh,
around
yeah.
after his rookie deal.
oh yeah. Now you might have him for 5 years because you got the 5th year option, but at the end of the day,
You're gonna pay for it.
you're going to pay for it. And at the end of the day, you got to do right by these players. You got listen. In business, I believe business is some people say 60% business and 40% people. I actually think it should be the other way around, in my honest opinion. I think at some level you have to care about the people, because the people make this thing tick. The people make the business tick, and for the Bengals' sake, the players make this thing tick.
Well, if you appeal to the
Yeah.
person as an organization, I talked earlier about you're a smaller organization. How do you gain advantages? Gain advantages with players by being an ideal player destination, by being a place that takes care of the players. How about that?
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
I mean, right? Like, that's the thing, is like you could easily change that narrative. And it almost seemed like they were doing that when they signed DJ Reader and Von Bell and Ted Karras and Alex Kappa. And suddenly it was like, okay, they're spending in free agency, but not just spending to spend money, right? But like actually targeting players.
Yeah.
And you had an opportunity with the whole rebranding of Joe Burrow coming and Elizabeth Blackburn taking on a bigger role in the organization as well, and kind of rebranding and moving the Bengals into the future. And that all felt like a really opportune moment to change how you handle these negotiations. And they just have not stepped up to the plate in that regard. And that's really, really disappointing.
You get Trey Hendrickson in here and you feel a lot better about this defense, Daniel.
Yeah, one thing, just when we were talking about the Trey Hendrickson thing, and obviously there's a lot of things that people are saying, oh, like whether, like Chris say, like I'm not with Trey. I think the one thing that we can look at is, hey, judge him by the character of who he actually is and the things that he said. And you just listen to any single person that's come in contact with Trey. This is a good dude, a religious man. And this is, I just kind of look at, okay, the character of the person. I don't think that he is trying to get one up on the Bengals. I think he's doing the right thing. So that's just how I kind of view it as, hey, this is not a terrible dude. This is a stand-up dude, a dude who has been in the community, a dude whose entire teammates rave about him, coaching staff raves about him, everybody who's been in contact raves about him. So that's just how I kind of view it as well, as, hey, I struggle to see how he's trying to screw over the Bengals.
Yeah, I think that even adds more frustration to it, because, look at all the contract, annoyances, Trey Hendrickson, Shemar Stewart. Like, we don't know Shemar Stewart to a degree, but these other people are great guys. Like, everything we've heard about Shemar has been great too. But it's not like we're like, negotiating with a great player that has a ton of baggage and off the field issues. T. Higgins has been very adamant about being a Bengals fan his whole life and doing so many fun things and all the things he's went through. And now Trey Hendrickson, again, this great guy, this guy that does so many things well for you in the community. And it's just like, why are these the people we're picking fights with? Like, that's the most frustrating part. It goes about being a good person. Just like, be a good person sometimes, man.
Some of these guys have given you some of the best memories, from ownership, front office. Some of these guys have given you some of the best memories in a Bengals uniform. They've given you some incredible moments. They are the reason why,
like
these
Whitworth?
stadiums, they're the reason
Like
why
Zeitler?
they're the reason why these stadiums are packed. When's the last time Cincinnati had a sack leader in the NFL?
How many people you see walking around with just like tackle jerseys?
Yeah.
Whitworth was like the staple, man, year in, year out. Like, yeah, you had Dalton, you had Green, but like you had Whitworth all over the place, man. Like, that's how important this guy was to the city, the organization. That's the kind of stuff, man. Like, again, you can finally, they got around to the Ring of Honor, but again, man, it comes back to having a little bit of humanity, having a little bit of empathy.
Yeah.
That's an investment that pays dividends on return, right?
And
that's an easy investment that doesn't cost anything.
Your word is so important.
Yes.
Right. I can go back to the Dre Kirkpatrick thing. Dre Kirkpatrick was looked at in his eye and told, hey, we're not going to cut you. And literally a week later, they cut him. A week later, they cut him. Joe Mixon was told that same offseason, we're not going to cut you. Right. And I hate to bring up that talk because his career, he's gone on, done great for his career, good for him. But the reason why there was so much hurt and so much people, blah, 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 was because he was told, we're not going to cut you. They asked him to take another pay cut after they asked him to take a pay cut before. That's what the dilemma was there. And then he got cut after you told him you weren't going to cut him. Germaine Pratt thing, they wanted Germaine Pratt to take a pay cut.
Telling
again,
Geno Stone to take a pay cut
yeah,
into
you know,
a 2-year deal.
Yeah, it's things. It's those kind of things that the curtain is not always peeled back on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's because it's not made so public. You have Trey, who's being very public about his annoyance with the organization, and it's a lot of the things that they said that they would do. So we'll see how this whole thing shapes up. We appreciate you guys for tuning into another episode of State of the Jungle, presented by the Right Way Sports Network, TWSN. Make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like. People were 100 people watching, only 31 likes. If you guys can do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. We will not be live next week. I will be out of town. Daniel will be out of town, but we will be back the following week, and we'll be talking all things through Bengals. Hopefully the Shemar Stewart situation, I expect that to be hopefully figured out by next week. And hopefully the Trey Hendrickson situation can be figured out rather quickly. It's disappointing. We'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, we appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us a part of your Wednesday routine. We are excited to be, on this journey with you guys and going live even more often. And until next time that we see you guys on State of the Jungle, who dat?